One could argue that if Sabeth had been born with a scent like anyone else, the Alpha King's carriage would never have stopped for her. Then again, if the house that raised her had not bolted the door and left her out in the cold, she would not have been in the road for it to stop for. So really, the whole business was their own doing. The trouble with Sabeth had always been that she smelled of nothing. Every other wolf in House Ostry wore their nature on the air. Joy and jealousy and wanting drifted off them like smoke off a banked fire, so that a packmate could pass another in a corridor and know a small true thing about them without a single word traded. Sabeth passed, and left the corridor exactly as empty as before. She had been sent blank since birth, a shut door where a soul was meant to sit, and to a pack that trusted its nose over its own two eyes. A woman it could not smell was a woman who was barely there at all, so they had found other uses for her. A creature no one could court could still be made to work. Sabeth counted the linen and kept the stores and mended what the highborn tore at their revels, and she did every scrap of it well, because a thing done well was the only kind of standing left to a woman no one could read. She told herself she did not mind. She was 19 years old, and she had grown very skilled at telling herself things. The truth she did not tell herself, the one she kept locked away with all the rest, was that she wanted to be wanted. Not by anyone in particular, just once, by someone, in the plain ordinary way the others took for granted. To step into a room and feel it turn toward her. To be a warmth on the air that made a wolf lift his head without meaning to. It was a small greedy wish and she was ashamed of it, and it did not trouble to go away for being hidden. Tonight the house had gone bright and frantic with the mating ball. Once each year, the unmated of the whole province climbed the hill to Duncarrow and gathered under the Alpha King's roof, and there, in the heat and the crowd and the candlelight, the noses did their quiet work, and matches were made that would hold for a lifetime. All afternoon the household had been a storm of hot irons and borrowed pearls. Sabeth had laced a dozen gowns that were not hers and pinned a dozen curls that would turn in a hall she would never be allowed to enter. "You needn't wait up," Iseline said at the door, drawing on her gloves. Iseline was the daughter of the house, gold where Sabeth was grey, and tonight she smelled unmistakably of triumph. "A mating ball is for wolves who can be matched. Whatever would we do with you there? Stand you in a corner and let the lords guess at the empty girl?" "Someone has to mind the fires," Sabeth said evenly. "Someone does." Iseline's smile widened. "Mind them out here, I think. The night air will do you a world of good." She stepped through, and the bolt went across behind her, iron kissing iron, and one after another the carriages rolled out of the yard with the whole laughing house folded warm inside them. And Sabeth was left standing on the wrong side of her own front door, with the cold coming up through the thin soles of her shoes. She did not weep. Weeping was a kind of scent, too, and she had long since stopped making even that. In the doorway of the empty stable, Doran hovered, 16 and miserable on her behalf, twisting a bridle in his hands. "It isn't right," he muttered. "You do more than the lot of them together." "Go on to your bed," she told him, not unkindly. "There's nothing to see." But there was. She wrapped her arms about herself and walked out to the road. The cold was the honest kind, the sort that found the seams of a person and settled in to stay, and she had dressed for a warm scullery and not for a night in the open. Far above her, Duncarrow stood lit window by window against the black shoulder of the hill, and if she held very still she could catch it, faint on the wind, the music and the low murmur of 500 wolves who could be smelled and who therefore counted for something. She told herself she was not listening for it. She was still there, a grey shape against a greyer dark, arms wrapped tight and her feet gone to stone, when the last carriage came down the hill. It was black and unhurried, drawn by two pale horses, and it belonged to no one she knew. She stepped well back to let it by. It did not go by. It slowed. It stopped. The door swung open on the warm dark inside, and a voice came out of it, low and unhurried and entirely certain of itself, and it said the single thing in all the wide world that Sabeth had never once expected to hear. It said her name. By the time the sun came up over Duncarrow, there was not a wolf on the hill who had not heard some version of the night, and not a single version of it was kind. Sabeth had heard them too, lying awake in the cold little room off the scullery where they had finally let her back inside near dawn. She had not slept. She had lain there with her eyes open and turned the night over and over. Not because it was a blur, but because it was so unbearably clear. That was the cruelty of the thing. A drunk woman might have been pardoned whatever came after. Sabeth had been stone sober for every impossible moment of it. She remembered the carriage door opening. She remembered the Alpha King himself, Severin, leaning into the lamplight and holding out his hand to her as though she were a lady and not a locked-out drudge with mud drying on her hem. She remembered taking it, because when a king offers his hand, a person does not stand in the road and argue the point. She remembered the ride up the hill and the great hall opening gold before her and the whole province turning as one to look. And she remembered what he had done then, which was to walk her the length of that hall on his arm, past every wolf who had ever failed to catch her scent, and announce, in a voice built to carry to the rafters, that he had found exactly what he had come out looking for. "You walked in on the king's arm," Doran kept saying, as though repeating it often enough might force it to fit inside his head. He was perched on an upturned pail in the scullery doorway, watching her the way one watches a person who has been struck by lightning and somehow lived to sit at breakfast. On his arm, and then he said it. In front of everyone Sabeth, he said it. I know what he said. I was standing there. "The whole hill is saying it now," said Briar, who ran the kitchen and did not, as a rule, waste breath on things. She was pushing 60, had buried 2 mates, and feared very little in this life. And she was frowning now in a way Sabeth did not care for at all. "They are saying the king of the province has gone soft in the head over a girl no wolf can scent. Some of them think it a great joke." She set a bowl of something warm down in front of Sabeth. "Some of them do not. Those are the ones I would keep an eye on, were I you." Sabeth turned the bowl in her hands and did not eat. She had spent 19 years being invisible, and somewhere along the way she had learned to think of it as a kind of safety. No one envied the empty girl. No one schemed for her place or begrudged her a match, because she owned no place worth the taking and had no match at all. Whatever the king had done last night, he had ended all of that in a single sentence spoken to a full hall. She was visible now. And visible, she was beginning to understand, was a far more perilous thing to be than empty had ever been. The summons came before Sabeth could ask what she meant by it. Mylis wanted her, and she wanted her at once. Mylis had run House Ostry since before Sabeth could walk, and she had been the closest thing to a mother the scent-blank child had ever been given, which was to say that she had fed her and schooled her and never once, in all those years, let her forget precisely what she was. Sabeth had spent a lifetime learning to read the woman by sight alone, since scent offered her nothing, and what she read now, standing in the doorway of the matron's narrow room, brought her up short. Mylis was not angry. Mylis was afraid. "Tell me every word he said to you," the old woman said. "And tell me what you said back to him, because whatever it was, girl, you have gone and set this house square in the path of something it has not the strength to survive." "I said nothing. I did nothing at all." His carriage stopped. King's carriages do not stop. Mylis's hands were not quite steady where they gripped the arms of her chair. "Not for you, not for anyone alive without a reason behind it. And if the king has found himself a reason to come nosing about House Ostry, then I must know what it is before he does." The gate bell cut her clean off. The two of them went utterly still. It rang a second time, a bright, hard note ringing out across the yard, an arrival that no one had cleared and no one had thought to expect, and underneath it, rising up through the very flagstones, came the sound of a single carriage rolling in. Sabeth watched the color drain slowly out of Mylis's face. The king had not sent for her to come up to Duncarrow. The king had come down to her. The Alpha King did not fill a room the way a large man fills one. He filled it the way weather does, quietly and completely and all at once, so that Sabeth felt the change in the air before she had properly turned to face him, felt her own wolf lift its head somewhere beneath her skin and come to attention against her will. The night before, in the dark and the shock of it, she had let herself half forget what he was. Standing in the grey morning light of Mylis's own doorway, he let no one in the room forget a thing. He was beautiful, which she resented, and he was watching her, which she resented rather more. Mylis was on her feet and low in a bow before Sabeth could draw breath. "Your Grace, you honor us past our deserving. Forgive the girl. I beg you, she forgot herself entirely last night. Whatever was said, whatever offense was taken, let it fall to me to answer for. and let the whole sorry matter be settled here and quietly. Settled, the king repeated, as though tasting a strange fruit. He looked delighted. Matron, I do hope you are not proposing to settle my betrothed out from under me. I should take that very much to heart. The silence that followed had a weight to it. Your Grace, Miles tried again. Please, you cannot in earnest mean to. Why ever not? He turned the full and lazy weight of his attention on Sabeth, and it was like standing too near a fire. She was found, and I did the finding. My wolf knew her on a dark road when no lamp could have shown me her face. Surely a matron of your years knows how these things go. A true match does not consult a person's list of qualities first, it simply arrives. And there it was, laid out neat as a snare. Sabeth understood the shape of it the very moment the words left him, and the cleverness of it turned her cold. A scent match. He had claimed the single thing in all the province that no wolf living could stand up and disprove, because she was the one woman none of them could read. To refuse it was to stand before the court a liar, the scent-blank drudge who had made a public fool of the Alpha King. To let it stand turned the whole of last night from a scandal into a destiny. Either way, the door had already shut behind her, and he had known it would, and he was smiling at her as though they shared the joke. She felt no bond. She wanted that noted somewhere, if only in the privacy of her own skull. Whatever this was, it was not that. There was no thread between them, no pull, no warmth, nothing but the plain, heavy presence of a powerful alpha filling up a small room. He was aware of that, and so was she, and even so he stood in the little room and spun the whole falsehood out unblushing, and for the life of her she could not find the profit hidden in it. As your Grace says, Malus murmured, defeated, and then, carefully, while you are here, might I beg your leave to double the watch upon the house? The road has not been safe of late. There was an incident on the western track not a fortnight past. Something flickered behind the king's easy face, there and then gone. A loose wheel and a nervous horse, he said lightly. An accident, nothing more. Still, set as many men on the walls as pleases you. If it helps you rest easy, there is no harm in caution. He brought his hands together with a soft clap, and the ease came flooding back into him. Now, would you grant me the room, and a private word with my bride-to-be? Miley's had no more choice in it than the flagstones did. She bowed, and she went, and the latch fell to behind her, and Sabeth was alone with the king of the province in a servant's cold little room. Your Grace, she began, last night I was out of my place entirely. You need not carry a farce this far on my account. Whatever game this is, I am no fit piece for it. He crossed to the narrow window and looked out at the yard, and for the length of a breath the charm went off him like a cloak set down. You truly do not know, do you? He said quietly. What you are. What it is worth. He turned, and his pale eyes found hers, and there was nothing lazy in them now at all. There is not another wolf in this whole kingdom that I cannot read at a glance, Sabeth. Not one, only you, and that is precisely why I have come down out of my hole to fetch you. His voice dropped lower still. A wolf who cannot be read is worth more to me than a company of swords. She is also worth a great deal to the wrong sort of people. You would do well to remember both. The pleasant face came down over him again before she could get the question past her teeth. He inclined his head, every inch the easy sovereign once more. I shall send for you tomorrow, he said. Do try to sleep. Then the door shut on the empty air where he had been standing, and the whole of her careful protest sat unspoken behind her teeth, with nowhere in all the world left to put it, and one hard certainty ringing where it had been. She had not been chosen, she had been recruited. By the 4th day of being the Alpha King's betrothed, Sabeth had learned that a house which had looked straight through her for 19 years could learn to fear her in a single afternoon, and she was not certain the fear was any improvement. The maids curtsied to her now, hurried and unsure. Iseline had stopped speaking to her altogether, which was its own kind of loud, and Melis, who had raised her, followed her with a soft, anxious care about the eyes, as though Sabeth were a lit candle left standing too near the drapes. That was the one that sat worst. She had spent her whole life reading Melis by sight, since the woman gave her nothing on the air, and what she read now was not anger, but fear, and it had not left the matron's face since the king stood in her doorway. She had told him, that first cold morning, that she was no fit piece for whatever game he meant to play. He had smiled as though she had paid him a compliment and sent for her all the same, and now here she was, summoned to dine in a room she had only ever cleaned. She went braced for sport. He was there before her, no crown, sleeves turned back, nothing kingly about him but the ease of a man who had never had to ask twice for a room to attend him. "You came," he said, pleased. "I wagered myself it would take 3 sendings. You are the king. One does not refuse the king. People refuse me from dawn to dusk. They only wear prettier manners about it than you do." He nodded at the chair across from him. "Sit. You are eyeing that supper as though it had insulted you." She sat and left the supper alone. "Why am I truly here?" "To eat," he said, all innocence. "You said it yourself in this house that I am worth more to you than a company of swords. Men do not say such things of a woman who counts the linen. I would sooner know what you think I can do, before I learn it the hard way." The ease thinned into something more careful. "What are you good at, Sabbath? Truly. Not what they have let you be. What you are." The question went in under her guard. "I keep the stores," she said at last. "I keep them well, and I know this house is being robbed." That stopped him. "Show me." So down they went, and she had meant to be brisk about it, to walk the king past it all and leave him no cause to linger. What undid her was the storeroom itself, the long cold undercroft where the house laid up its winter, for the moment she came down the steps some knot she had carried all evening loosened. "Every quarter the house lays in stores," she said, moving along the half-empty racks. "Grain, salt fish, tallow, wool. The ledger upstairs sets down what was bought, and every quarter less of it reaches these shelves than the ledger swears came through the gate. Never so much at once that a body could shout about it. I have watched it go thin for 6 years." He ran a hand along a bare shelf. "Where does it go?" "That is the very thing no one above has ever cared to ask me." "Who keeps the upstairs ledger?" "The matron, Melis." She said it with no weight, because it had none for her, and did not see the thing that moved once behind his eyes. "I carry her the tally of what comes in. When it does not meet what was paid, she tells me I miscounted. I count again. It still does not meet. She tells me to leave it be, so I leave it be. One learns which doors not to knock upon." "And if I told you to knock on that one, would you? Is that what I am for?" He did not answer it. He asked to see the tally in her own hand, and she fetched the worn little book she kept for no one, and set it in his hands, and watched him turn the pages with an attention no one had ever once given her work. When his thumb stopped, she leaned in to point, of a sudden near enough to catch the warmth off him. "There, the autumn salt fish, paid for in full. Half of it never came through the gate. I marked it. No one read the mark." "I am reading it," he said, and did not look up, and something warm and perilous turned over low in her chest, and she resented every degree of it. He walked her back across the yard himself when the lamps were down, which a king had no business doing, and it was between the stable and the well that the night came apart. She felt it before she understood it. Not a scent, she had never owned one to trust, but a wrongness her eyes had learned across a lifetime of reading the world without a nose, a shape at the stable wall the dark did not account for. The wind was set wrong, carrying away from the house, and a wolf who trusted his nose would have walked on into the dark and died there. Sabbath had never once been able to trust her nose. She caught the king's sleeve and hauled him hard sideways, and the air where his throat had been filled with the flat cough of a crossbow, the bolt shivering in the stable door. "Down," she said, and shoved him to the wall. They came out of the black all at once, faces bound, and Sabbath was no trained blade and knew it. What she was a woman who had survived 19 years at the bottom of a hard house, which is its own kind of quick. She took the first man's rush on her forearm instead of her chest, felt it open the sleeve and the skin beneath, and put her whole weight behind the lamp iron in her other hand, and he went down and did not rise. Then the king was past her, an alpha with nothing playful left in him, and the second man folded under his hands. But there were more than two, so Sabbath did the one thing only she could. She stepped back into the dark where no wind would carry warning of her because she gave none, and unseen and unsmelled she reached the yard bell and rang it fit to wake the province. A whistle cut the night, sharp and clean, and the men still on their feet broke off and were gone, the way paid men go, and frightened men never learn to, and then the watch was pouring into the yard, with torches, too late for anything but noise. The quiet slammed down. Her arm was alight. Nothing else stirred. The king stood where she had left him, breathing hard, unafraid, looking at her across the wrecked yard, as though she had just worked out a sum he had carried a long while. "They came downwind," he said softly. "Not a man on my walls would have known they were there until the bolt flew. You knew. You cannot be read, Sabbath, and so you have spent your whole life reading everything else. Do you begin to see it now? What you are worth?" "I see that someone wants you dead," she said, pressing her sleeve hard to the cut on her arm. "And you are not the least bit surprised. This is not the first time, is it?" Something true moved behind the easy face, then folded itself away. "You have taken a cut," he said, gentle now. "Let me tend it." She did not give him her arm. A fortnight passed, and Sabbath spent it the way she spent everything, watching and adding it up, because a man who could be shot at in his own stable yard and then fret over her sleeve was a sum that would not come out even. Someone wanted him dead. Of that she had no doubt. So she did the thing she had always done best, unseen in the corner of a house that forgot she was there. She watched. She gathered. Was the betrothal only a shield then? A blade he could keep at his side with no soul questioning why, for who questions a king for keeping his intended near? Or was it the stores? He had gone very still over the salt fish. Every day she built the theory up a fresh way, and every day he took it apart without appearing to lay a hand on it. She would set a hard question in front of him, and he would answer with a jest. She would press, and he would tell her that suspicion became her, and steer the talk 3 fields sideways before she saw the gate swing open. Once cornering him on the men in the yard, she watched him catch the question in the air, turn it over and set into her hands instead some small carved trinket he swore he had won off a horse trader in the low market. It was halfway through her rounds before she understood he had told her nothing at all, and that she had let him. He handed her nothing worth writing down, and a great deal she had nowhere to put. Briar had opinions, as Briar always did. The kitchen matron caught her one grey morning with flour to the elbows and a frown already loaded. "They have taken to laying wagers below stairs," she said, "on how long a scent-blind girl keeps a king's fancy before he tires of the novelty, and the whole province recalls she was nothing." She wiped her hands slow. "A man who lifts you up before 500 wolves can set you down before as many, girl. Mind your feet." Sabeth minded them. She also, to her private disgust, went on watching the door for him. For the plain trouble was this. The more hours she gave to studying him for the shape of a threat, the fewer of them had a single thing to do with threats. She was only studying him. He took to finding her on her night rounds. She walked the sleeping house each night near the midnight bell, banking the great fires down safe and drawing the bolts, the last soul awake in all of House Austri, and that hour had always belonged to no one but her. Now he was simply there in it, a shape by the dying hearth with his fine coat forgotten, keeping her company through the cold still middle of the dark as though a king had nowhere better in the world to be. "You do not know what it is," he said one night, watching the coals, "to cross a crowded hall and be struck by every soul in it at once. Fear and wanting and grief and greed, all of it beating against you off the air all the time since I was a boy. There is no shutting it off. One learns to smile through the noise and call the smiling ruling." He looked at her then, and there was something bare in it. "And then there is you. I stand at your side and there is nothing. No noise, no pressing, only quiet. Have you the faintest notion what it is to me, to have found the one still room in the whole kingdom?" She had spent 19 years being told her emptiness was a lack. Not one living soul had ever called it a mercy. She looked away first because she could not hold his eyes and remember how to breathe at the same time. She held out longer than she would have guessed she could. But a night came, late, the fires down to embers, when she set the poker back on its hook and found her hands unsteady and past caring which he saw. "What is it you want of me?" she said, and it tore on the way out. "You will not say what you are after and you will not let me be, and I cannot go on standing in the middle of it. Tell me it is the stores. Tell me it is the swords, that you want a blade nobody watches and a face nobody remembers. Tell me anything with sense in it, because I made my peace long ago with never reaching for what was never going to be mine. And you have gone and broken the peace." She stopped. Too late. "Reaching for what?" he said low, and there was no jest left anywhere in him now. "Do not." She shut her eyes. "You have known for days. You have let me suffer it." He crossed to her without hurry, the way a person moves toward a creature that has not yet decided whether to bolt. "Then send me back up the hill and mean it," he said, very quiet, "and I will go, and I will not trouble your fires again." She looked at him. She sent him nowhere. He kissed her. He kissed her, and the careful, watchful thing she had been her whole life simply went still. There was no hall looking on, no house, no crown, only the banked red glow of the hearth and the hush of a sleeping house, and the sudden whole overwhelming fact of him. One hand rose to cradle the back of her head, and his mouth met hers warm and unhurried and certain, and her knees forgot the plain work of holding her upright. A sound got out of her that she would have died of, had she kept the wits left over to be ashamed. And here was the thing she had never told a living soul, the wish she had locked away with all the rest. She had wanted, just once, to be wanted. Not for her strong back or her steady hands, not for the way she could cross a room without troubling a single head to turn. Just once, plainly, for herself, the way the others had been wanted the whole of their lives without ever thinking to be grateful for it. She had made her peace with never having it. She had been wrong about the peace. It folded her clean in half. She caught her fist in his collar and drew him down and kissed him the way a woman kisses the one thing she has spent weeks refusing to admit she wanted, which was the whole truth of it. He drew her in against him, and she let him. And the fire sank low in the grate while the sleeping house kept its own counsel. She only let herself be held. She had been useful to people the whole of her life. She had never once imagined it could be like this, to be wanted for nothing at all but herself, to be the whole of what someone wished to keep. They stayed like that in the ember light, and for a long while, neither of them spoke. "You have gone quiet," she said at last, handing him back his own words, and felt more than saw him smile. "I am concentrating." Then the jest fell out of his voice. "No one wants the man, you understand. They want the king. The favor, the seat near the head of the table, the ear at the useful moment. I learned very young to hand them the king and keep the man well out of sight, where he could not be spent." His hand moved slow along the line of her spine. "You never once reached for the king in me. That first cold morning you stood in the matron's room and told me to my face that you were no fit piece for a king's game and that I could carry my farce back up my own hill. It was true." She felt him laugh, low and real. "It was the finest morning I had passed in years." She lay still and let it settle into her, warm and frightening in equal measure. Somewhere under her ribs, a thing she had kept nailed shut her whole life was working itself loose, and she had not the first notion how she would ever fix it down again. She woke before the dawn bell with the weight of his arm settled over her, and the strange animal comfort of a second heart beating close to her own. And for a while she only lay in it, and let herself have the thing she had been told her whole life was not meant for the likes of her. Melis had said it so softly, so often, across so many years, that Sabeth had long since stopped hearing it as a wound at all. "You were not made to be seen, love. Better to keep to the quiet, be useful, and not go wishing after what was never laid out for you." It had always worn the face of kindness. Lying here, warm and wanted, and beyond any doubt seen, she could not for her life recall why she had ever believed it right down to the bone. She might have slept again. But his arm drew tight, and he murmured something into her hair that did not quite reach the shape of words, and then he came awake all at once in the way of hunted men, and rose, and moved. Through half-shut eyes, she watched him cross to where his coat lay and draw from the lining a small square of paper, worn soft with folding. She watched him read it by the thin grey light with his back to her, and watched his easy, open face go cold and still and unfamiliar, the face of a man doing sums with lives inside them. Whatever it said, it was not for her. He held it a breath longer than the reading of it wanted. Then he set its corner to the last live ember in the grate and watched it curl to ash, and when he turned back, the warmth had come over him again, so smoothly, so wholly, that she very near believed she had dreamed the rest of it. "You are watching me," he said, smiling. "You are worth the watching," she said. It was true. It was only not the whole of the truth, and she knew the difference, and she chose the smaller, safer half. She told herself the burned paper was nothing, a matter of state, a king's business, and no concern of a woman who kept the stores. She told herself so in the very voice she had used her whole life to swear she was not made to be seen, and with just as much cause. She had never in her life been so happy. And she, of all women, should have known what it costs to look away from the one thing in the room that does not fit. There is a kind of happiness a careful person never quite trusts, and Sebeth had it now, and she spent a fair share of it braced for the bill to come due. We will pause here just a moment. If you would like to see how her story turns, and to be here when the next one begins, take a breath and subscribe to the channel, and then we will go on together. The great houses came up to Duncaro at the turn of the season, as they did every year, to take the measure of the young king and settle among themselves whether he was still a boy they might manage or a man they had best reckon with, and they came with their households and their account books, for the gathering reckoned the season's stores as much as it weighed the king. So House Austri came up the hill entire, Malis and her ledgers among them. This year, to Sabeth's horror, the king meant to give the houses their answer with her on his arm. She stood in blue silk at the edge of a hall she had spent her whole life being kept out of, and felt every eye in it find her, weigh her, and put her away again. The scent-blind girl. The king's strange fancy. She held her chin where he had asked her to hold it, and hated how badly she wanted to do him credit. "Stop looking as though they mean to hang you," he murmured at her ear. "You look as though you own the room. Believe it, and they will believe it too. They can smell that I am afraid. They can smell that everyone here is afraid. It is a room full of wolves with knives under the silk. You are the only soul in it I cannot read, which makes you the only soul in it who frightens me, and I find I rather enjoy being frightened by you." He turned her hand up and set his mouth to the inside of her wrist, in front of all of them, and the whole took careful note. She ought to have known the ease of him for the performance it was. But he steered her out onto a cold gallery above the gardens where the music thinned, and there the mask came off, and he leaned on the stone rail and looked tired in a way no one in that hall would ever be permitted to see. "You hate this," she said. "I have hated it since I was 19. He said it plainly. The smiling, the being precisely what each of them needs, so not one of them looks hard enough to find what I am not. Some nights I cannot tell you which of the faces is mine." He caught himself, and the charm began sliding back over him like a drawn cloak. "Do not mind me. Self-pity is a poor color on a king." "You are not the face," she said before she could weigh it. "The man under it. I have met him. I like him a great deal better than the king." Something cracked open behind his eyes. He kissed her then, not the easy public thing of a moment before, but something fierce and grateful and half undone, and she felt herself lean in, felt the whole floor of the night tilt beneath her. It was not the warmth she knew, it was not wanting. Where his skin met hers, something came flooding across that was not hers at all, a great helpless rush of relief and fear, and a tenderness so raw it stopped her breath. His. She was feeling his. She, who had never given off so much as a flicker for another wolf to catch, stood on a cold gallery drowning in the whole heart of a man who could not be shut out. She wrenched back with a gasp, his eyes were black and stunned. "Did you?" he began. "Sabeth, that was." "It was nothing." Her voice came from somewhere far away. "A trick of the cold. Nothing at all." She watched the word land and take the light straight out of him. "Of course," he said, gone quiet and careful. "Nothing. You are right." But the ease had a crack running down the middle of it now, and they both heard it. A servant came onto the gallery with a tray, 2 cups of wine dark as pitch in the moonlight, and murmured his grace and offered it up. Severin, wounded and distracted, reached for one. Everything in Sabeth's body said no. She had no scent to warn her, only a lifetime of reading what the nose blessed missed, and what she read was a hand not quite steady, and eyes that would not settle, and a faint wrong sweetness riding under the wine that no wolf drowning in a hall full of scent could have picked out. She struck the cup from his fingers. It burst on the stone. "Do not," she said, her hand locked round his wrist hard enough to bruise. "Do not touch it. Under the wine. Do you have it now?" She watched his nostrils flare, watched him catch by its absence what she had caught. His face went the grey of the stone. "This was for you," she said, "to put you down, or to put you under the ground." His free hand closed over hers. "You will breathe not a word of this," he said, low and hard, and no longer wounded at all. "Not to the houses, not to the watch, not to anyone. There is an envoy of the Marrowmere under this roof tonight, and if it is known the king was poisoned at his own table with their lord looking on, There will be steel drawn across the province before the candles gutter. Do you understand me? No, she said. I do not. Someone has just tried to. I know precisely what someone has just tried. He drew a breath and gentled, and it plainly cost him. Trust me one more time. I know the shape of this thing. I am nearly at the end of it. Give me until morning, hold your tongue, and let me finish it my own way. Every part of her that had served a house that never once kept faith with her wanted to scream the whole down. But the feel of him had not left her, that great undefended thing that had come pouring across when they touched, and she heard herself say, "Until morning, I promise." Relief moved through him, and she felt that too now, and hated that she could not stop. He pressed his mouth to her brow, quick and grateful, and then the mask came down whole and smooth, and the king turned back to his hall. "Wait for me," he said. "I will not be long." She counted to 30 under her breath. Then she went after him. She kept to the walls, the way no one had ever needed to teach her, and watched him smile and deflect and pour himself back into the crowd, and watched him slip through a side door the instant he judged no eye was on him, and watched the smile fall off his face the moment the door closed. Her stomach fell with it. Down he went and down again into the cold lower rooms of Duncarrow, where every house had lodged its books for the reckoning of accounts. She followed the sound of him to a door left ajar and pushed it wide. The king stood over the table set aside for House Austrie, its record drawer pulled open, and spread in both his hands was the great upstairs ledger kept in Melis's own hand, the one book in all her house she had never once been let read. He looked up. For a long breathless moment neither of them moved. "Sabeth," he said, very calm, very careful. "This is not the thing you are about to decide it is." The king never groped for words. In all her weeks of him she had never seen a reply fail to be waiting behind his teeth. Now he stood over the House Austrie ledger, the great book open in his hands, and he said nothing. "Say it," she told him without a sound. "Say the thing that makes this bearable." He set the ledger down. "I have been hunting a thief," he said. "For the better part of a year. Someone has been bleeding this province a little at a time, through the stores of a dozen houses, and turning the coin of it into blades. The men on the western track, the men in your yard, the cup tonight, they were bought Sabbath. I have spent months walking the money back to the hand that pays them." He laid one finger on the open page. "It runs through here, through House Austrie, through the woman who keeps this ledger." The words would not resolve into meaning, they were only sounds. "Mylis," she said. "Mylis." "No." She said it flat, the way you say a thing to stop it being true. "Mylis raised me. Mylis is." She stopped, because under the roar of "not Mylis, never Mylis," something cold and quiet had begun assembling itself, and it was made of 6 years of tallies that never met, and a matron who told her, over and over, in that soft kind voice, to leave it be. "You needed someone inside this house," she heard herself say. "Someone close to her, someone she trusted, who could go where a king's men could not, and be counted for nothing, and never be suspected." She lifted her eyes to him. "That is why the carriage stopped, that is the whole of it. You wanted the one wolf in House Austrie that no plot built on scent could ever touch, and a locked-out drudge in the road handed herself to you." He did not deny it. He held her eyes and said nothing, and the silence was the loudest thing she had ever stood inside. "Tell me I am wrong," her voice broke across. "Severine, tell me." He looked at her a long moment, and he did not tell her she was wrong. She put her hands over her face. She had been so stupid. He had asked and asked, the stores, the ledger, who held the keys, who kept the count, and she had thought he found her interesting. She had thought a king had looked at the empty girl and seen something worth the looking. "All of it," she whispered. "From the road, it was all a use." "Not all of it." He came round the desk. She gave ground, and he checked himself on the instant. "The finding of you was a plan. What came after was not. I will not stand here and pretend the first, but do not ask me to deny the rest because—" "Then why not tell me?" It tore out of her. "If you knew, if you suspected her, why not simply take her? You are the king." "Because being king does not make me safe." His steadiness frayed at last. "Melis does not stand alone. Behind her is the Marrowmere, and behind them half the great houses, every one of them waiting for the young king to overreach so they may pull him down for a tyrant. If I seized a beloved old matron on a servant's word and a column of figures, there would be steel in the streets by dawn and my head on a spike by dark. I had to be certain. I needed proof not one wolf alive could argue with, and the proof lived in her ledger, and the single soul in this house who could set a true tally beside her false one and be believed by none because they had spent 19 years making sure of it, was you. She went very still. What did you say? Think, Sabeth. His voice gentled, and it was worse than any shout. You keep a tally in your own hand, 6 years deep. Truer than a word in that book. And you have never once dared carry it to a soul, because you were certain to your bones that no one alive would credit a girl who smells of nothing. Where do you suppose you learned to be so sure? Who told you, softly, kindly, every single day of your life, that you were empty, that you were barely there, that you were made to keep quiet and be useful and never, ever be seen? The answer rose on its own before she could speak, and stopped her mouth. Malis at the edge of 100 grey mornings, that soft voice like a hand smoothing a coverlet. You were not made to be seen, love. And she understood, all at once and years too late, that she had been kept small on purpose, not from cruelty, from use. A blind, silent, self-doubting girl who kept the very stores that were being robbed, taught so carefully to disbelieve herself, she would never once say so aloud. She built me, Sebeth said, and her voice did not sound like her own. So I would sit on top of it and never breathe a word. Yes. And you knew. The tears came, and she let them. You knew what she had done to me, and you watched me step in front of a blade meant for you, twice over, and you let me fall asleep at your side believing it was real, and through the whole of it you kept the reason from me. Why not me, Severin? Of every soul in this palace, why not me? Because I did not think you would believe me. It came out low and wretched. You would have gone straight to her. You loved her. I could not stake the only proof I had on the chance that you chose the woman who raised you over the man who stopped his carriage in the road. I called it strategy. He shut his eyes. It was cowardice. I know the difference. I learned it too late to spare you. It was, curse him, a fair answer. That was the thing she could not forgive, that it was fair and that she hated it for being fair, and that she could not stay in the room another breath with how fair it was. You owed me the truth, she said, and went for the door. Sabbath, please. His voice cracked. There is a poisoner loose in my house and the Marrowmere at my table, and I... He caught himself and chose worse, truer words. And I cannot come to the end of this without you. And there it stood, she thought, even now, even at the bottom of everything. Not I am sorry, not I was wrong to spend you, only the king's oldest habit, dressed as a plea. Good night, your grace, she said, and walked away into the dark of the lower passages, and left the both of them behind her. She did not get far. Mylis was waiting at the turn of the stair, a candle cupped in one hand, as though she had known Sabeth would come this way, as though she had known the whole of it. And Sabeth, whose life had just been turned inside out on a cold flagged floor, felt her feet carry her toward the old woman before her mind could catch at them, because Malis had lifted her out of the cold when she was small, and had made her over into a person who could keep her own feet. Except she was not keeping them so very well just now. There you are. Milas set the candle down and took her by the shoulders, hands warm and sure, face all soft grief. You have been weeping, oh child. He told you then. What he is. He told me. Her voice was a husk. He told me it was you. Something moved through the old woman's face, quick and gone. And had Sabeth not spent 19 years learning to read her by sight alone, she would have missed it. She did not miss it. She set it aside where she kept such things. Of course he did. Mylis sighed and drew her close, and Sabeth let herself be drawn. That is what his kind do. They find the loyal old fool who has kept a house 40 years and hang their own sins about her neck, for a matron cannot fight a king. Sabeth, hear me now, for I have wished to spare you this and can spare you no longer. Her voice dropped, gentle and terrible. It is the king who has been bleeding these houses. For years, it is the king who empties our stores and turns them into coin. And now a girl with a sharp little book has begun to notice. He means to lay the whole of it at my door and burn House Ostry to the ground to hide the seam. And you, my darling. When you have served your turn, do you truly believe he keeps a scent-blind drudge at his side? It was very well done. It was so well done that for a moment the floor swung clean away under her. And then the counter began, quiet and cold and built of numbers, because numbers were the one thing Melis had ever taught her that Melis could not now unteach. 6 years. The stores had gone thin for 6 years. She had watched it with her own eyes and marked it in her own hand. 6 years passed. The man they now called king had been a boy of 19, newly come to a seat he did not yet hold, 100 miles from House Austria, unknown to a soul here. He could not have bled this house for 6 years. He had not been within 100 miles of it. But Melis had kept this ledger for 30, and the king's account, every ugly word of it, sat flush against 6 years of tallies that never met. Melis's account did not. Melis's account asked her to unknow the single thing she knew better than her own name. She is lying to me, Sabeth thought, with a calm that frightened her worse than any tears. The woman who raised me is lying to my face, this moment, with her arms about me. And the king told the truth. Her hand wanted to move. Old habit. But no. Not here, on a dark stair. One scent-blind girl against a matron who could summon every servant in the house by name. Melis expected her broken and furious and hungry to believe the worst of the man who had used her. So Sabeth gave her exactly that. She let her face crumple. She let herself shake. "What do we do?" she whispered. Melis's eyes sharpened on something that was not love at all. "We go to the Marrowmere envoy," she said, "before the king can dress his lies for the morning. A king who robs his own houses and murders to hide it is a king the great houses will not suffer. He will fall, and there are good steady hands ready to hold the province when he is gone." Her thumb stroked Sabeth's cheek. "But it cannot come from me, child. I am a matron. They will say I grasp above my station. It must come from one they will believe without a breath of doubt." Softer still, almost fond. "It must come from you. His own intended. If the king's bride stands up and names him thief and murderer, not a lord in that hall will doubt a word." "They will believe me," Sabeth said quietly. "They will believe you. Because no one would think the empty girl clever enough to lie." "Because you love him," Milis corrected gently. "And no woman condemns the man she loves unless it is true." She smiled. "You see? There is a use in you yet." And there it was, the whole of it, laid bare in 4 small words. A use in you. She had heard them her entire life in that same soft voice, and only now, far too late, did she hear the thing that had always been living underneath. It had never once been love. It had been keeping. She had been kept the way one keeps a good knife in a drawer, oiled and quiet and out of the light, against the day it is wanted. "Take me to him," Sabeth said, and let the old woman believe she meant the envoy. She had never in her life walked so short a way at so dear a price. She had one chance to turn the snare inside out, and nothing to turn it with but her own plain word and a little book in her own hand, and one foot set wrong meant a war for the province and a blade between her ribs before she reached the end of the sentence. She had spent 19 years being unseen. It was, she thought, the very last thing any of them would look for her to be good at. The Marrowmere envoy had taken the long council room in the east wing, and the great houses had gathered to it like crows to a turned field, for word had gone round that something was breaking open at Duncarrow. The king was already there when Melis led her in. He looked up, and for half a breath, everything in his face rose to meet her. Then he marked whose arm carried her in, and it all went dark again. "My lords." Melis sank into a low bow, the very image of a grieved old servant. "It shames me past bearing to bring this before you. But your king has wronged this province, and wronged it long, and the proof of it has lived under my own roof, too frightened until this night to speak." She turned, and the room turned with her, to the scent-blind girl standing pale and silent by the door. "Her proof, his own betrothed. She has no reason on this earth to condemn him, my lords, and every reason under it to shield him. So when she speaks, you may be easy that she speaks only because she must." She put out a hand. "Sabeth, tell their lordships what your king has done." Every head in the room came round to her. The Marrowmere envoy, leaning in, hungry. The gathered lords, half decided already. Melis, sure of her to the bone. And Severin, across the room, who believed she had come to bury him, and who said not one word to stop her, because he had decided the choice was hers to make. She looked at him. "Forgive me," she said to him without a sound. "I should have trusted you long before this." Then she turned to the room. My lords, she said, and her voice held, which astonished no one more than her. I keep the stores of House Ostre. I have kept them 6 years, and in that time I have watched them robbed, a little at every quarter, grain and salt and coin gone before it ever reached a shelf. Every time I carried the count of it up to the one who keeps the great ledger, I was told I had miscounted and sent on my way. She lifted her chin. I did not miscount. I have never once miscounted in my life. I keep a truer book than the one upstairs, in my own hand, 6 years deep, and it names the quarter and the goods and the sum of every last thing that went missing. The room had gone very quiet. And here is the matter their lordships should weigh. She made herself go slow. This robbery is 6 years old. 6 years past, your king was a boy of 19 who had never set foot in House Austri. He could not have begun it, but the woman who keeps that ledger has kept it 30 years. She turned, at last, to the matron who had raised her. You told me not an hour ago, on the stair, that the king had bled these houses 6 years long, but you taught me to count, Melis. You taught me far too well. A boy 100 miles off cannot empty a storeroom for 6 years. Only the hand that holds the book can do that. Melis's soft grief did not so much as waver. The girl is not in her right mind, she said smoothly to the room. He has broken her heart and unstrung her wits. Sent blind from birth, my lords, and never quite whole in her. Then send your men to her rooms. It was not Sebeth who said it. It was the king, quiet and terrible, risen from his chair. But Sabeth spoke across the end of it, for the finishing was hers. Send them to her chambers before she can go herself, she said. Tonight, this hour, while she stands in this room 100 miles from her own locks. Your men, my lords, not hers. See what they turn up. The papers of an honest matron wronged, or a second book kept in a hidden hand, and beside it the coin that has 3 times paid men to put your king in the ground. She held the envoy's eye. One of us has kept a false ledger. Send someone who can read and learn which of us it is. This cannot be borne, Melis said, and for the first time the softness split, and something older showed through the seam. You would take the word of a nothing girl who cannot so much as... If there is nothing in her rooms, the Maromere envoy said, and there was iron under the mildness of it, then a look there costs her nothing at all. And he lifted a hand to his own guards, and something went out of Melis then. The grieving servant was simply not there anymore. What looked out through her eyes in its place had been waiting a very long time under the warmth, and it had no softness anywhere in it, and Sabeth watched 30 years of a kind, gentle mask come away from the woman who had raised her, and felt something in her own chest break quietly and for good. Melis moved, not for the door, for Sabeth, and Sabeth caught the small bright thing that dropped from the old woman's cuff into her waiting palm, a thin blade or a thin vial, she could never after say which, only that it was meant for her, the one loose thread that might still bring the whole design down. But this was the one ground on which the reckoning fell in Sabeth's favor. Milas had spent 19 years teaching her to be invisible, to watch when no eye was on her, to cross a room and trouble nothing in it. She had never once thought to ask what such a girl might do with all that quiet if the day came that she turned it. Sabeth was moving before the bright thing had cleared the cuff. She caught the old woman's wrist and turned it the way you turn a thing you would rather not break and break all the same, and brought her down, and the whatever it was skittered away across the council floor. She bent to the ear of the woman who had made her. You taught me to count, she said, low, for her alone. And to keep silent, and to go unseen. You ought not to have taught me quite so well. Then the envoy's men closed over Melis and took her up off the floor and carried her out. And the thing that had run in the dark under this house for 30 years was over. They found the second ledger before the candles guttered. They found the coin. They found, folded small in a locked box, letters in a Maromere hand that turned an old matron's theft into something a good deal larger, and the long council room stopped being a trial of the king and became something else entirely, and men who had come up the hill to pull Severine down spent the rest of that night contriving to be seen at his shoulder. And through the whole of it, he watched only her. When the room had thinned, he crossed to where she stood. That is twice now, he said, that you have kept me breathing when it would have been simpler to let the world have me. I came for the traitor, she said, not for you. Do not make it more than it was. The light in his face wavered. The bond is real, Sabeth. You felt it on the gallery. Whatever else was false, that was not. Real or not, it changes nothing. Flat was the only way she could hold it, so she held it flat. I stopped her because she was a traitor and because those stores were mine to defend. There was no forgiveness anywhere in it. She made herself meet his eyes. You used me, Severine. You let me love you across 6 weeks and never once told me why I stood in the room. The bond does not buy back what you spent. Being right about her does not buy it back either. His face fell, and the hope went out of it, and she watched him understand that he had broken a thing that would not knit itself whole again, only because the guilty had been caught. I am glad you are not dead, she said, and found she meant it, and that it changed nothing. You will make this province a good king, better than it has deserved. She paused at the door. But I do not trust you. I cannot tell you if that will ever come back. Sabeth. Her name, in pieces. There is nothing I would not do to earn it. Only name the thing, and I. She was already gone. 6 months is a long while to be proved right about a thing and take not one grain of joy from it. Sabeth was keeper of the province's stores now. The king had made it so within a month of that night in the council room, a true post with a true seal, the counting of every house's grain and coin set under the eye of the one wolf in the realm, who could neither be bought nor read. She had taken it because the work was good, and because it was hers, and not, she told herself firmly, because it kept him within reach. The rot was cut out clean. Milas sat in a cold cell beneath the old keep. The Maromere letters had brought 3 wavering houses back to the crown, and the far households that had gone short for 6 years had their full measure at last, every sack of it carried out under Sabeth's name, because the king had insisted the name on the writ be hers. The province began warily to love him for it. The boy king they had all meant to manage had grown teeth in a single winter, and none of them could quite say how, and Sabeth kept her mouth shut and her books straight and did not enlighten them. He courted her the whole 6 months, and was neither clumsy nor proud about it, which she could have forgiven a good deal sooner than either. He did not send flowers. He sent instead a standing writ that made no requisition in the province good without her mark, so that 100 households which had gone hungry now ate because a scent-blind girl allowed it. It was the kindest thing anyone had ever done for her, and she knew exactly what it was. A man who had learned she could not be wooed, and had resolved to be useful to her instead, since use was the one tongue she had ever been permitted. Twice in every week the war table set them opposite one another, and he would look up and find her, and something hopeful would start across his face, and she would drop her eyes to the columns. When the work was done, he would hang a moment in the doorway, hunting an excuse to stay. Keeper, he would say softly, that was all. She left the room every time regardless. The bond was no help to her in any of it. She had come to know its way by now, this thing that ran the wrong direction, that carried him into her when she led it and carried nothing back, for she had nothing to give off and never had. Left to itself, an open bond only grew, and a grown one set, and a set one held for the whole of a life. So she starved it. She had a lifetime's practice at starving things, and she told herself this one too would thin and quiet and at last let her go. What no one had thought to tell the scent-blind girl, for who explains a bond to a woman no bond should ever have touched, was that a starved bond does not fade, it is a wound that will not close, and it does not spend its price on the one who shuts it. It spends the price on the one shut out. Near the 4th month, she began to notice that the king had gone quiet. Not the performing quiet she knew, the ease laid over the weariness, a true quiet. He was thinner at the council table. The charm still came when the houses watched, but it came slower and cost him more, and once she saw him grip the table's edge as he rose only for a moment, as though the floor had shifted. She told herself it was the work. She told herself a great many things that winter. In the 5th month the letters came, and near the end of it they stopped. The last was short. You have made yourself plain, and you have every right to it. I have understood at last that my asking has become one more weight on a woman who has carried too many that were never hers. I will stop now. Be well, and be free of me. She read it twice. It was everything she had told him she wanted, and she sat with it a long time, and could not work out why it lay in her chest like a thing ended badly instead of well. He held to it. The letters ceased. So did the waiting at doorways. When they passed in the corridors, he inclined his head. Keeper, courteous and even and never once cold, and went on. It was precisely what she had asked of him, and every night the patient warmth lodged beneath her ribs refused to shift so much as an inch, and every night she pressed it down and bade it wither. Then, on a black morning in the 6th month, Doran came pounding into her counting room, white to the lips, Briar astride behind him wearing the grey face of a woman who has already guessed the worst. "He's gone," Doran got out. "The king. Not in his chambers, not on the grounds, not anywhere. His guard have hunted since the small hours and cannot find him." His voice split. "No horse missing, no coin drawn, his sword on its rack, his cloak on its hook. He is simply nowhere, keeper, and they daren't sound the alarm, for if the houses learn the king has vanished, there will be." She found she was already standing, with no memory of rising. "Who saw him last?" she said, reaching for her cloak. "And which way?" But even as she asked it, she knew the trackers would turn up nothing, for there was only one road left in all the world to find a man who could not be found, and she had spent 6 months refusing to walk it. She went out into the cold yard alone and pressed her palm flat over the shut and aching thing she had been strangling since the leaves turned. "This is the work," she told herself. "He is the king. I am sworn to his safety, and there is no more to it than that." It was not the whole of the truth, and she knew the difference, and for once in her life she chose the larger half. She opened the bond. It came through like a shutter torn off in a gale. Cold first, a deep bodily cold that owed nothing to the yard. Then a great grey exhaustion, bottomless, the very twin of the one she had carried all winter and would not name. Then, under it all, faint and slow and guttering, like a lamp burned to the last of its oil, him, not gone, not taken, fading. A wolf whose bond had been starved half a year, walked out into a winter night with nothing left in him to burn. She ran before the fear had finished arriving, out through the gates and down off the hill, away from the warm windows of Duncarrow, and into the black of the low road, and she ran it as she had run nothing in her life, because every stride told her the lamp was guttering lower. Briar called something behind her. She did not stop. She knew where the road was carrying her before she was halfway down it. She had known, if she were honest, from the moment Doran said gone. It carried her to the cold stretch of low road below House Austry. The exact place. The very patch of dark where a locked-out drudge had once stood with her arms wrapped round herself and her feet gone to stone, listening to a music she was not let dance to, on the night a black carriage came down the hill and did not drive on by. And there, in the frost, with no carriage and no crown and no guard, and not a scrap of the easy golden mask anywhere left on him, sat the king of the province, his back to the cold stone of the gatepost, in the very spot where she had once stood, as though he had come down to the one place in all his kingdom where a soul had once been left out in the cold and had run clean out of the strength to leave it again. "You are not meant to be here," he said when her shadow fell across him. His voice was a ruin, and he did not raise his head. "I told you. I said I would stop. I meant to." He blinked up at her, slow, fever bright. "You opened it. I felt you open it. I thought I had dreamed you into the frost. You unspeakable fool." She was on her knees in the ice, hands on his cold face, and the fear had turned to fury, which was the one thing holding her upright. "You came out here to die of it, of me. You have been dying of it for months and never said a single word. I did not want it to be a weight." He smiled, a terrible thin wisp of the old smile. "You had carried enough. I thought I could carry this one alone." He shuddered, and the cold of him poured through the bond into her, and she gathered him against her without deciding to. Her cloak dragged round the both of them, her whole stubborn body a small warmth against a king freezing to death at the foot of her old front door. "You stopped for me," she said into his hair, "here, on this road, when I was the one out in the cold and not a soul alive would have faulted you for driving on." Her voice cracked clean through. "And now look at the state of you." "I would stop again," he mumbled against her throat. "1,000 nights running." His hand found hers, cold as the stone. "I did not use you, Sabbath. Not past the first. I came to know you and to love you, and I hadn't the courage to gamble it on the truth. The stores were only ever my excuse to keep coming back." She could feel every plain word of it come across the open bond, undefended and true, the man who had hidden everything his whole life with nothing left now to hide behind. "Marry me," he said. Everything in her went still. You are half frozen and out of your senses, she said. Almost certainly. His eyes were sliding shut. Marry me regardless. I should have asked you the night I stopped the carriage. I have wanted to ask every day since, and been too much a coward, and I am done with cowardice. I have not the strength left for it. The bravado fell away, and left a man with nothing behind his eyes but the whole plain, undefended truth. I am no good without you, and I did not know until this winter that a person could be so cold. She knelt there torn clean in two, half of her wanting to shake the life back into him and half wanting to hold him against the cold until spring, and she made herself do the hard, true thing instead of the warm, easy one her whole chest cried out for. Not like this, she said. When you are warm and whole and standing without me to hold you up, and the morning still finds you of the same mind, then you may ask me, and I will answer you honestly. She got her shoulder beneath his arm and hauled him up out of the ice. His head lolled against her neck. You mean to say yes, he breathed. Live through the night, she said, and you may try me in the morning. He did not die on the road, though he made a fair attempt at it, and the fever kept him abed the better part of a fortnight. Sabeth held the bond open the whole of that time, forgiveness decided or not, because a shut bond had very nearly put him in the ground, and she was not fool enough to shut it a second time. She told herself that was the only reason she sat by the bed. She told herself so for a fortnight. She was not, by the end of it, telling herself especially well. When he was strong enough to stand, he asked her. He asked her badly the first time, too eager, before his legs were truly his own, and she told him to sit down before he fell down and try her again when he could. He asked her the second time across the war table, before Doran, who dropped a whole tray of counters, and Briar, who declared that if the king proposed to her keeper one more time in the middle of a working council, she would hand back her apron for good. He asked her on the cold road below House Austri, warm and well and upright this time, at the very gatepost, which she told him to his face was cheating. He asked her earnest, and he asked her clumsy, in his right mind and steady on his feet, and every day she told him to ask again on the morrow. It became a thing the whole hill knew of, the king who could not stop proposing, and the keeper who could not be made to say yes, and Doran began laying odds on it, and lost most of them. Then, one grey, unremarkable morning, she looked up from her counts and found him watching her with that hopeless, hopeful face, not even asking, only looking. And she heard herself say yes, before he had got a single word out. He went very still. Yes to what? He said carefully. I have not asked anything. Yes to the thing you have asked me every day for a month, she said. Ask it once more and be quick before I recall that I am meant to make you suffer. He asked. She said yes. Doran cheered loud enough to be heard in the next province. Half the province crowded the hill to see it done. There were those who muttered still that a king ought to match with a wolf whose heart he could read on the air, and Sabeth, who could now feel every warm, foolish thing her husband felt come pouring through a bond that ran only the one way, thought privately that they had it exactly backward, and did not trouble to set them right. Let them wonder. She had never once needed a nose to know a true thing when it stood in front of her. She had wagered he would weep at the vows, and he did, without shame, before the whole hill. Her own eyes she kept dry by main force, and would have carried it off too, had the traitor Bond not gone and carried the truth of her straight across to him, so that he was laughing and weeping at once by the end, and she found she had stopped minding who saw. You stopped for me, she said to him, when it was done, and the hall roared around them. On the coldest night of my life, when the whole world had bolted its doors and driven off and left me standing in the road, you did not go by. I have thanked every god there is that I did not go by. He set his brow to hers. Though I will note, for the record, that in the end it was you who came down the hill in the dark and stopped for me. Someone had to, she said. You were making a truly dreadful mess of it on your own. And she kissed the king of the province at the foot of the aisle, the empty girl no wolf could read, who had been bolted out into the cold and turned out in the end to be the one thing in all that dark worth coming out into the cold to find. For once in her life she did not argue with her own happiness. She had spent that life counting, every sack and coin and cold shortfall of it, and this was the first thing she had ever been handed that came out to more than whole.